it's time to talk about the close range meta, and usually wait a few days to kind of let things settle out, because a lot of times in the beginning of the season, people will claim X, Y, or Z are meta, and it doesn't always end up being the case. So I like to try and make it as accurate as possible when we talk about the top weapons. And that's not to say you can't have favorite weapons, because I know certain people lean towards certain play styles or whatever the case, and depending if you're playing solos, duos, trios, quads, it could be other variables. And this is specifically for Warzone, right? So we can kind of go through. Luckily, the new gun that they added was actually pretty good, because we kind of had a couple little nothing burgers for a while there where the new guns that we're adding were kind of useless. It's nice to see the brand new gun come over here at the 17th fastest TTK at 630 milliseconds. So it's super competitive. But the best part about that gun is that it has insane movement. You can either do a tactical sprint build or you can do a max strafe build. Really depending on your skill level, play style, there's a little different variables in it. On this part right here, you can kind of see how these ones are. I've had these pretty much updated since day one, is kind of what I was leaning towards. The LSW is hands down the best long range, which we'll do a long range video later on, but spoiler, that loadout really hasn't changed. Sniper support we'll cover, but when it comes to close range, we got WSP9, the Superi 46, the FJX Horus are probably like the top three. If you don't mind the slow firing of the WSP9, you're going to go with that because it hits hard. It has the fast TTK out of this group. The FJX Horus got a huge buff, so it's pretty good. Fast fire rate, which is super forgiving for up close. Terrible iron sight, so you might have to sacrifice an optic for that. And the Superi 46, which is kind of the jack of all trades. Biggest kind of slight weakness is it only has a 40 round mag, but that generally gets the job done to get you at least 2 downs, depending on how aggressive you are. Then we got the Jack BP50, that's the one with the conversion kit that makes it smaller. And then we got the Striker, which still pretty good. Unfortunately, they kind of did nerf the Striker 9. I know the AMR got buffed, which is pretty solid. I really haven't talked to anyone or seen anyone use the gun. I personally didn't think it was great. So I'm going to kind of just stick to some of the other guns that I'm using, and we'll go ahead and get into loadouts. Let me know if there's anything that you kind of are enjoying that maybe didn't make the list. And access to that list is available within the description. You just click the spreadsheet, you can bookmark it, and it'll update automatically. So it kind of gives you an idea of where things at. And those include all the recent aftermarket parts that were added. I kind of just picked them up either through testing on day one, or if I missed something, then I could pick it up off of true game data or even sim whenever they get around to updating their sites. So it's good that they shook it up. I was kind of tired of the HRM, and then we were kind of into a Striker 9. I just wish they would continue to buff guns. It's sad to see guns get nerfed just because that ends up being less options. We'll go ahead and start with the Striker. This is the base version. I think this is more ideal as a sniper support. It's not the best all around in this category, but it's pretty solid, especially if you like a little bit of versatility. You can kind of see there's the build. This one is a little bit different. We used to do like a no stock build or whatever the case was with the Jack BFB a while ago. This is kind of the one we've had for a while now. Keeps it really easy to use. Then we get into the MCW, and this is the one with the conversion kit that we've been basically talking about since December. They kind of relatively left it untouched, which makes it pretty good, because if you nerf a bunch of stuff and this gun's already good, it just ends up being better comparatively. So that's kind of what we have here. This is kind of a build for this one. A lot of people popularized this one because it felt like the XM4 from Cold War when that was a meta in Warzone, and you can kind of see pretty easy to use. The visuals are pretty nice on this optic. You can really use whatever optic though. This one's just kind of more for the funsies of reliving that XM4 nostalgia if you're really a fan of that style of movement, using a rifle as an SMG. Then we get into some of the other ones that we've already touched on quite a bit. We've got the close range BP50 along with the WSP9, which we'll get into both. BP50, they only nerfed the movement on this, so it's significantly slower, and that was kind of one of his strong suits. I think they really wanted to open the door for the new gun that just came out. So although the damage still kills pretty fast relatively, you end up with a gun that just doesn't move as fast. It still moves decent enough, but before it was kind of broken how fast it was moving, and it's kind of one of those fun gimmicky guns. Again, a rifle, so you kind of got to sacrifice your rifle ammo. That's one of the downsides or drawbacks that's kind of hidden when you talk about these guns until you actually use them, and then you need to shoot people at range, and then you're like, oh man, what the heck is going on? You can kind of run out of ammo if you don't plan for that with munitions. WSP9, this is kind of the go-to we've had for quite a while. I like to run this with an optic. It does have a slower firing rate, which is kind of the struggle for most, I think. And it has that open bolt delay. So a lot of times if you pull the trigger, there'll be a slight delay. But if you know someone's there and you're pre-firing, you should win the gunfight. Slow firing, so if you miss, you have a little bit more dead time before you get back on target, versus the next two guns that we're talking about have considerably faster fire rates. And that's going to bring us to pretty much what I would consider WSP9's part of this, but these are kind of like the hard meta at the moment. You should be using these if you're trying to just be as competitive as possible, but the other guns are still in a pretty good spot where you can have fun, mix it up, and not feel like, damn, I wasn't using the #1 gun and that's why I lost, which that's kind of a terrible feeling. In the game has kind of generally avoided that for the close range, especially recently. Long range, it's terrible. There's 1 or 2 guns and that's kind of it. Everything else feels kind of like trash because they've nerfed so much, but that's an entirely aside for a different video. So when we get into the FJX Horus, this gun kind of went under the radar. It had a decent TTK, but one of the biggest problems is its range kind of sucked. Even with this setup, the range is still not amazing, but before it was like 8 meters or something like that. Now it's like closer to 12, which is huge. Rate of fire is almost 1,000. 48 bullets, you're going to make those disappear pretty quickly. So you can kind of see how this is. And it's going to be more of a closer range gun. Obviously, the bullets you can't really afford to be missing. It really should have a 60 round mag. I know a lot of people ask about that because they're like, I see this 60 round mag. The reality is there's going to be another attachment slot down here for an aftermarket part that's coming later, which is basically a conversion kit that can make it into a completely different gun, and that will not be equipable. Just like when you go to the MCW, at the moment, if you're using the conversion kit, you're not able to use the 60 round mag. It's restricted to the 40. So you can see those other 3 magazines are not equipable. Vice versa will be the same with the opposite. So it's kind of, that's how that's going to work. So unfortunately, it won't help the gun when that gets added unless the conversion kit is actually pretty good. But we'll see what the conversion kit actually does. Then we got 2 different builds for this. So you want to make sure you're not using the wrong one, so you can at least try both of these. So this is kind of a more general build that a lot of people were actually recommending in the comments. It is more built for tactical speed. You can see by behind my camera, we got tactical speed at about 7.6 and strafe speed at 3.8, which is still pretty respectable, with an ADS speed of 211. So pretty solid stats there. If we go ahead and move on and maybe swap this around, we can go ahead and kind of see what this looks like. I would still use this. You can get rid of high grain, and then you can put on this barrel that's going to increase your mobility significantly. You can see it bumps it up to 4.3, which is a half meter per second faster, which is pretty huge. Over 10% increase with the 13 there. The other thing you can do is the Jack Cutthroat, which you had to unlock. And this one, you can see that it bumps it up even higher to 4.9, another 14%. So the difference between these, as we'll see side by side, one's going to have a little bit more recoil, use the iron sights, but look at this movement. It's actually kind of crazy how much you're able to move it there, but it's going to have slightly more recoil. You could go the other route where you're going to get a little bit more range out of this, but you're going to end up having a little bit less recoil. So that's actually more what I think is a little bit more versatility, but it's nowhere near as insane on the strafe speed. You will be able to tack sprint faster, which is cool. You're going to be able to get around in a way, but in an actual gunfight, you're going to be slightly slower. So it really comes down to preference. Some people don't like strafing that fast because then it gets a little cracked. But the FFAR meta, that was a meta for a reason back in the day because you were able to strafe so insanely fast. So either build is great. It just depends on your preference. Appreciate all the support. Thank you for watching as always. Have a great day.